Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sathology, Debunking Mythology. As usual, Sathology means science of truth, study of truth, and mythology is a science of fake lie imagination, study of fake lie imagination. Today, I earned a great friend whom I'm going to work very closely to challenge the colonization in South America. Today, we are also have a very special guest, Rishi, Muni, Tapaswi, and intelligentsia, the real intelligentsia, not the fake one, and also a true Indologist, because there are a lot of fake Indologists all over the world, and people who do not have faith in Vyasadev, Valmiki, people who have no faith in Vedic scriptures. They think that everything is confusing, contradicting. For an intelligent mind, there is no contradiction because they have faith that somebody is more intelligent than them. But the problem is that we have become the guru of even Vyasadev. That is the biggest problem. And I must tell you, a son can be like his father, but cannot become his father's father. So with that, we just welcome Shri Nilesh Nilkant Oak. Welcome, Nilesh ji.
Namaskar, Aditya ji.
So Nilesh ji, this is the biggest problem is today is that monotheism is better than pantheism, or probably the monotheism is the best thing. But we all know that these monotheistic ideas have destroyed civilizations, that only my version of God is truth, and there is only one way to God through me, and which is like a totally stupidest idea, that we have even introduced politics against Bhagwan, against God. What do you have to say on that?
If you look at a simple house, any house, you will find at a minimum, people start thinking of having a door or two, usually more, but depending on the restrictions, few windows, right? And everything has a purpose. The window is not same as the door. Okay, window has a certain purpose and door has a certain purpose. Okay, and sometimes people will extend and make a sunroom and so on. So even in a very simple aspects of life, we think of multiplicity, multiple things, and they have their purpose. Somehow, when we think of the ultimate truth, okay, we get so biased. And biased because of what? Biased because of raga, dvesha, moha. Three things. Attachment to something. How does that attachment comes? Many times it comes from where we took birth, what our parents taught us, what the society around us taught us. And we chose not to use our own intelligence, the true intelligence. The second aspect is a dvesha. Like, therefore, once we make certain way our mind, anything that contradicts, we think this cannot be right, or that is bad, or that is inferior. Okay. And the third one is a moha, which is lack of intelligence or stupidity. And that's why people simply cannot take the knowledge and understand it. So for example, take monotheism and pantheism, and there are many other variations you will see. If you, even the monotheism, if you understand in the context, you say, okay, I know exactly what the person is trying to say. Okay. And if you talk of pantheism, then also, but we talk pantheism, which is what? That one reality, ekam sad, vipra bahuna vadanti, that one reality, but it is described in a different fashion. Just like we are saying the house. Okay. It is a one, what you can say, one unit, right? But we just don't say, okay, just create one hole through which we will communicate with the outside world, or we will look outside. No, there are windows. There are, there are special apertures where the light can come from the top. There are doors, multiple doors, various arrangements, sunroom. It is there for a reason. And so I will, when I get into presentation, I will show you a quote of Henrik Zimmer, where he said, the ultimate reality we are trying to understand, which is a Upanishadic language, by the way. Henrik Zimmer is simply translating in some fashion in English. The truth is very difficult to explain. So what happens? It's not difficult, but we explain it with the help of metaphors, and the metaphors get misunderstood. But I'll come to that. So that's my point. If understood in a context, the monotheism can be also understood and can be understood as a special case of pantheism. But if that's not understood, then the chaos begins.
Yeah, pantheism can be a superset, but the original definition of, so all these different words have come from the word theism, which is again, the origin can be Haim, and different etymological reasons are there. The the concept is like a pejorative one. Like, for
Mm,
example, Hindus are called pantheistic, Buddhists are also called pantheistic, all the Native American cultures are called polytheistic, and all. So what happened was that because I have less information, therefore I call myself monotheistic, or less information. And you're absolutely right that monotheism can be a subset of pantheism also, because somebody believes in one Ganeshji
mm,
is as much bhakta that as me, anyone who is else worshipping Vishnu. Equal level, both are considered equal. Uh, Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk about not worshipping Devata.
mm,
Never talks about that. Bhagavad Gita says that they are my parts and parcels, and with cooperation with them, prosperity reigns for the Manushya, all the
mm,
human beings. But the Western conception of monotheism and pantheism is a racist concept, that we need to civilize them because they are pantheistic. We need to civilize them because they are polytheistic. So
mm,
it's like, I am the judge, I am the jury, I am the victim, and I am the controller. That
mm.
is what the Western civilization has done. And therefore, on that basis, we have been challenging a lot to all these people, but I don't think so they are going to get it until they adopt yoga or something more wide, so that their minds can open up. So my question to you will be that, in this world, because you are doing such an excellent research on Mahabharata and different aspects of Mahabharata, which is actually you're doing on all Veda. Mahabharata is the Veda. So what is a Vedic answer to these kind of problems?
Vedic answer to this kind of problems? Well, I think humor helps sometimes, and telling the reality to people with the help of humor also helps. Because what it does, it keeps the mood light, okay? And the person with the intelligence, he will understand it. I mean, he has no problem. On the other hand, the person who is really stuck into, I mean, we see those, right? I mean, you get messages. We don't have to even come to the West, many Indians, right, really stuck into the dogma. I mean, they will just create nonsense too. So that can happen anywhere. So I think the humor helps. Or did we not? Yeah, we talked another time, the four types of people and four types of situation and how we deal with them. I'll just give you one simple short anecdote. Like, one of my good friend, and an ex-colleague, um, he's an aerospace engineer, I'm a chemical engineer. We used to go together many times for lunch. And Are you finding trouble with transmission,
No,
Aditya? No, okay.
it's getting
Uh,
slowed actually. That's why I'm having an issue.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, for me on my side, it's very smooth. But yeah, I saw your facial expression, so I thought maybe my voice is not coming well.
Mm.
So we will discuss everything under the sky. You know, I mean, we have discussed so many subjects, but related to what you just asked. So sometime, I mean, as one thing will lead to another. And so he would say, well, in the Western religions, this is how it is taught. I mean, we discuss everything under the sky, as I said. And immediately, and this became almost a cliche. Every time he would use the word in Western religions, and I would just say that. And we used to have a laugh about it. And I say, his name Bob Belanger. I said, Bob, what do you mean? So he said, well, in Western religions, people tend the monotheistic, it's a monotheistic. I said, that's fine, but there is no Western religion. I used to say, and my, of course, this was just a humor, but my humor was that all religions, all the even the so-called organizational ism religions are all from Asia, all from Asia, you know.
All
All
from
the
Asia. Yeah.
big, so there is no Western religion, you know. I mean, unless you want to consider Asia as a West, you know. So that was just my joke. The point is, we went on to discuss whatever we want to discuss, and he and I were doing it truly to, just the last point on that one, truly to comprehend. See, even in the Indian side, when people read Mahabharata, or anything, Bhagavad Puran or Krishna's lifetime, Krishna's age, and they say, so how do you reconcile what Bhagavad Puran is saying, what Vishnu Puran is saying, with what Mahabharata is saying, with what Madhvacharya is saying? And they will even add, and with what someone like Professor Srinivas Raghavan, who in 1969 thought of Krishna as only 81 years old, you know, because, and still everything was totally utter foolish, what he was claiming. I mean, his effort was good. So I'm not saying what he is a foolish. His attempt was actually to defend the Hindu civilization against a recent convert to Christianity. That's why he was doing it, right? So he was fighting with available tools. But in the process, he just made some makeshift truth where Krishna became 81-year-old. Okay. Now, how do you reconcile? And my answer is, and I'll give it back to you. My answer is, in some cases, actually, in many cases, the important point is that you understand, you comprehend, you slice and dice and put it together in the most logical fashion. You do not always reconcile, because sometimes there is no need for reconciliation, or you shouldn't even reconcile. For example, someone who in certain religion, someone thinks whoever is not part of your religion, he should be killed. And then somebody comes and says, how do you reconcile that? No, we don't reconcile it. We say it's nonsense. That cannot be such a religion. It cannot be a dharmic activity. You know, it doesn't matter where it happens. In this case, we have to comprehend and act accordingly, not reconcile.
No, good point you said, and also the whole thing about, I'm going to bring out a new series on Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Jainism, Buddhism. Why so many isms only on the Eastern cultures? And the secondly is that when the Sanatan Dharma followers start dividing Vaishnavism, Shaivism, and other aspects, isms or Shaktiism, also it has comes now.
Yes, yes.
Now, they are actually playing into the hands of the colonial masters. Because if you look at any of the ashram, first of all, nobody was differentiated whether it's a Veda or Mahabharata stories or Ramayana. Nobody was discriminated against which devta they are worshipping, because all devtas were considered part of Hari. So if somebody is worshipping Shivji, which is we all must do it, Vaishwananam Yatha Shambhu. So we all must do it, but it doesn't create subcategories of Sanatan Dharmis. Because everyone is after Brahma and Parabrahma. That is a general quality. So the misconceptions, like we as a Hindu Samaj, what we have done is we are playing into the hands of people who are dividing us because they want to make us weak. You know, hand is strong when all the Panchabhut is together.
Correct.
Like similarly, we have Panch Devta, prominent ones, Surya, Agni, Chandra. So these are the people who give life.
Yeah.
And so when it is together, then and together Das is Dash Avatar. And Indriya, if you start including, then it is Dwadash Aditya. So anyway, the point is that we are playing into the hands. What do you have to say on that?
Yeah. Oh no, I mean, good one. I mean, you just started counting like few and then 3 and 5 and then 10. You can go to the Sankhya and
that's right.
26, right? And the whole point is, as a simple metaphor, or a comparison, take a car, right? Now, modern car, for example, it has the gear mechanism. Then it has the crankshaft mechanism, the tires, the propelling mechanism. Then it has seats, cars, doors. That's certain things, wipers, how the things get done, glasses. Then there is electronics in it, right? These are different, and individual person may be expert in certain area and may only study the electronics that goes into the car. Other person may be expert in tires, and the third person expert in gear mechanism, but they all have to come together. just like Shad Darshanas. Many Shad Darshanas also see the Darshana guys also fight with each other. But that, I mean, if done right, that fight is to be understood to evolve that science. Like, right? So some people say tire guys is fighting with the electronics guys, saying, hey, I don't want that kind of electronic control because my tires will not perform well. That fight is good because
That's
it is
right.
for a constructive purpose, right? And so let me actually start sharing. I mean, today what I'm going to discuss. What you'll find is we think of these as different powers, but again, I mean, this is a perfect good example of pantheism, and also the fact that we do this as a for analyzing. We have to separate out, right? So electronic system is one, the tires is another, gearbox is another, car seats is another, doors is another, but we have to bring it together, right? So same thing happens with the world, but at some point we have to bring it together. Now Galileo learned this in 500 years ago, but what you'll find is the whole entire Vedic wisdom knew this. Okay, Mahabharata is talking about it. Vedas is talking about it. You know, celestial is equal to terrestrial. Okay, or microscopic. What you see in the microscopic world is exactly gets replicated into macroscopic world, the telescopic world. You know, microscopic to macroscopic, telescopic world. Or if you take fractal mathematics, you know, you go to the smallest level, you get the same patterns. You go to the cosmic level, you get the same patterns. You know, that is there everywhere. The Galileo understood it 500 years ago. Celestial is equal to terrestrial.
Now, one just point
Yeah,
here,
please.
and they call it extraterrestrial or aliens. So where does that go against Galileo then?
Well, extraterrestrial, they will not go against. I mean, they call it extraterrestrial because outside the terrestrial, meaning the Earth, Galileo said the extraterrestrials are celestials.
Yeah.
Right? And we hear that, you know, Swarga say Apsaras are coming from Swarga, you know, they're extraterrestrial, they're celestial, you know, the celestial Apsara, right?
So many videos are coming on different channels on the UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and the Earth is going to end. You've heard this like 700 times. You've heard this story. Earth is going to end. All coming from biblical. I call it biblical confusions.
Yeah.
Because every Earth is going to end, and Earth has a natural protection against small meteoroids. And it has never happened during the time of Brahma. We can see that the planet Earth, other than Hiranyakashipu's story, went down. It never happened. So the entire the what do you call it, biblical confusion of biblical proportions is like creating movies. It's a good fodder for Hollywood now. Another movie came out on how the planet they are going to save through nuclear, as if the nuclear bomb is going to deflect a meteor. Not possible. It can impact, it cannot change. Anyway, we'll continue with this and we'll talk further.
No, that's a good point. And but I would also I would also say that whatever may be the source of it, there is a eager audience for it. So what happens when people's level of entertainment changes? I will not put it go down. Actually, that's what I think. Like, you know, the TikTok and whatever. I mean, even when I don't want TikTok, the TikTok shows up sometime on my phone. I don't know how, and I don't even have to stop it. But it has really taken people's intelligence down to certain level. So there is a certain level of audience that is created, and so that's I mean, you know, that's why the people will make it, you know, like the field of dreams, like if you build, they will come and play kind of thing. So my point was to tell the ultimate truth is either extremely difficult or extremely simple. The challenge is if you make it very simple, then people start saying, how can it be the ultimate reality? How can it be so simple? Like you say, okay, that is the Balakrishna, you know, with a flute on his lips. And you say, how can it be that simple? Then you start talking about fractal dynamics and astronomy and precession of the Earth's axis and then obliquity. And he says, I cannot comprehend it. This is a problem of a very foolish intellectual lifestyle. Why? This is like saying in Indian sweet, or in American audience, we can say dulce de leche, or Indian sweet like something like rabdi, or basundi, or srikhanda. For some person says, you know what, I cannot digest dulce de leche, I cannot digest rabdi, I cannot digest this. But then you give that person a milk, a skim milk, and he says, oh, it doesn't taste good. No, that is that foolishness, right? Same thing with the truth. Now, what the great sages like Vasudev, for example, Bhagwan Vasudev, what he has done, and many other sages like Valmiki also, and many others, they are taking the truth, which is either too difficult or too easy, and people don't like those too easy or too difficult. So now they try to find a middle path, and they try to tell us through stories. And how the stories come to us? Well, for a story, which means we need a metaphor, right? The metaphors, it is told to us in a metaphorical language, but it also has its problems. So today I'll tell the story of envious sisters from Mahabharata. It is not from the time of Mahabharata. Okay, it happened long time before Mahabharata. So it happened long time before 7,500 years ago, because 7,500 years ago is the timing of Mahabharata. And if you now, somebody may just understand the story and just remember it, and it has its value, and I'm going to show you what the value is. But somebody, the Vasudev is telling us in such a way, it's like, how can you say? You give someone an important device. You talked about the nuclear weapon or something. So, the nuclear codes are given to you, but they are password protected. Okay, so you may be carrying all the nuclear codes there, but they're also password protected. Unless you know the password, you will not able to use them. Okay, you're not able to release the missiles. Vasudev entered those passwords in a way, not just a single password, multiple layers of password. Okay, that is that Grantham Granthi Tada Chakre Munir Gudam Kutuhalat. Curiosities, mysteries, and twists. 3 levels of sophistication is what Vasudev has entered or added to this Mahabharata. Okay, or that is true of all Indian civilization literature. So, like Upanishad, for example. So, Envious Sisters, at just a surface value, you just think it's a story and you may enjoy it, and which is great. But to a person with a deep intellect, there is a message. And for example, that message will take you to about 15,000 BC, that is close to 17,000 years ago, to a situation on the earth, astronomy phenomenon as seen from the earth. Now, we talked about pantheism, right? Multiple devatas. Ekam sat vipra bahuna vadanti, Rigveda says. And then it starts talking about like Brahmatvam, Vishnustam, Rudrastam, Indrastam. The Indra is the same as a Brahma, is the same as Vishnu, is the same as Agni, and so on. But for just like the car, when we look at the car, the electronics of the car and the tires of the car and the steering wheel of the car is the same as a car. It's like saying that. But they have a specific purpose. They have a specific point of view. What specific mechanism is executed by that particular aspect. Similarly, we have this Agni, Indra, Skanda, Brahma. Keeping it very simple, that goes to say nakshatra system, which is what? Like these are milestones. Sun basically helps us understand our terrestrial. Okay, that's why in Patanjali Yoga Sutra we, I think, looked at it another time. Bhuvana Jnanam Surya Sanyamat. When you study sun, study everything about the sun, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. You have no other business but to focus on the sun. Focus doesn't mean just like sitting with a closed eyes or open eyes and staring at the sun. Focus meaning understanding, studying everything about the sun. You get a bhuvana jnana, the knowledge of the terrestrial. Chandre tara vyodnyanam, like with the moon, you get that knowledge. That's why they have a different purpose. So Agni, you say the Kritika, the nakshatra, Agni and Kritika are connected, and we will see how. Indra is identified with the sun. You will also find the Agni is also identified with the sun. Now, this is when Adityaji, people start getting confused. Agni is visualized as a 3-way. It can be visualized in many ways. For example, sometimes you see 7 tongues of Agni. Those can be seen as the 7 rays, but 7 types of jwala, 7 types of flames, 7 colors of flames. Now, sometimes you see with the 3 heads of Agni, which is what? which is fire, lighting. Okay, so lightning, fire, lightning, and sun. So therefore, you can see Agni identified with the sun, Indra identified with the sun, Skanda. Okay, Skanda, Kartikeya with the 6 heads. Now see that Kartikeya is connected with the Kritika, with the Agni too, and we'll see how. Again, this was remembered in a story form. But Skanda is what? Skanda is the Earth's axis. So Earth's axis with the up and down plus east, west, north, south. Okay, those prime 4 directions plus up and down. That's why the 6 heads of a skanda. And Brahma is considered the creative principle, okay, the calendar maker. Because once the creation happens, even the modern science, with whatever view, it thinks that until there is a creation, until there is a Big Bang, there is no time. Well, Brahma is saying the same thing. Once the creation begins, naturally there is a time, and to keep track of time, we need a calendar. So Brahma is connected with the calendar. So we are talking of this interplay, understanding the truth of cosmology, astronomy, calendrics, time, space, everything, and we're bringing it together. It can get very confusing. People like great sages are trying to make it easier for us. But if we just think whatever that story is, that's it, and there is nothing more to it, then of course we are the fools. Okay, the foolishness is up to us. Let's look at these 4 deities. Okay, in Hindu civilization, we have a Brahma, the creative principle. We have a Indra at the bottom on the Airavat here. Okay, I mean, we can take Adityaji any single picture, and we can have a 1 hour or week long or a year long discussions on this. The why, I mean, of course, Indra is represented in many different ways, but also see Indra on the Airavat. Astronomically, do you know what that is? The Jeshta Nakshatra, its deity is a Shakra, meaning Indra. And if you look at the area of a Jeshta Nakshatra, what is it? It is the scorpion, you know, the Scorpio, Scorpio as a zodiac. In Indian astronomy, it is the Airavat. How beautiful. So that is the area of Airavat, and Indra is there as a Jeshta. Okay, so that's how we can see, and we can go deep into it, but today I want to go somewhere else. In the top right hand corner, what you're seeing is Indra, and I think here it is shown with those multiple flames at the top, you know, fire going up. But if you see 3 heads, and they are referring to the fire, the lightning, and the sun. Okay, now this is Swaha. Okay, that is his wife, which in the story, and therefore again we talked about how do we understand. How do we reconcile? Well, sometimes you don't reconcile. Sometimes you just comprehend. Okay, sometimes you have to understand the metaphor. Sometimes you have to understand why that is a simile. Sometimes you have to understand why such an analogy is given, and not take it just with a superficial knowledge. You will be doomed. And you can see many Mahabharata researchers doomed just because of that. So Swaha is also considered one of the Rishi Patni from Saptarshi. Okay. And if you read that story, and it comes in Mahabharata Vana Parva, you will say, what is going on? And the idea behind this is very similar to the dhyana, like to get you so much engrossed into the subject that you say, what is this going on? And once you start going deeper, you start understanding that this is a metaphor, trying to tell you something more, like a Shakha Chandra Nyaya. Okay, somebody who doesn't know, has never heard of the moon or never has seen the moon in the sky, and at night you bring that person out and so many stars and things are there, and now you have to show, look, that white thing up there, but there are so many white things up in the sky. So now you may take help of a tree, and that is a Shakha Chandra Nyaya, a branch of a tree, and say, look through those 2 branches of a tree. Do you see that circular white thing there? That is the moon. That's called Shakha Chandra Nyaya. You took help of a tree or a branch of a tree or branches of a tree to explain about the moon. That is exactly what is done through these deities, okay, to explain the Sat, the truth that is behind, okay. So this, if you get stuck with them, just get stuck with the Brahma, stuck with the Indra, stuck with the Agni, or stuck with the Skanda, then they want to be transparent to transcendence, but you chose to make them opaque, and you just decided to stop here. Now that is one's choice, but you will not know the truth behind it, for which they were actually created or they are being employed to make you understand the truth. The last one is the skanda, and as I said, it's the axis of the earth. Therefore, 6 faces. Okay, up and down, plus east, west, north, south. Okay, now what you asked me initially before, the confusion between monotheism, pantheism, and monotheistic thinking only, that's correct. Okay, the best thing can never be told. Okay, so even whoever tried to explain monotheism, okay, you take, say, in a Western religious context, say Moses or Jesus or whatever you want to call it, or like Saint Augustine, whoever is trying to put some philosophical foundation finally for them, the best things can never be told. So they are making approximation. Many times they get misunderstood. They themselves might have misunderstood it. Like St. Augustine did misunderstand the cyclical universe, cyclical understanding of Indian civilization. He made it perfectly cyclical in the sense of concentric. It is not concentric, it is paracyclical. But he misunderstood. And unfortunate thing, Aditya is that misunderstanding of St. Augustine or of the West has come to the East and to India. And I'm not talking only in the academic circle. Academia is like, humanities is just totally gone out of control. It's flopped. They are just doing more disservice to India. But even I'm talking of the so-called sincere religious folks, or so-called sincere appearing religious folks, or Indic folks, whatever you want to call them, pro-India folks. Even they are digesting it, what you call the hook and sinker and everything, and making a chaos out of this. The best things can never be told because they transcend thought. So therefore, we make use of metaphors. The second best are misunderstood. What are those? Metaphors, analogies. Okay, and people think they're just analogies. They're just metaphors. They're just nimitta. They're just some scary descriptions. Yeah, they are scary descriptions. Sometimes it is a mixture of some scary descriptions, and sometimes there is a truth. Just like to a child, when we are telling don't go out in the night, okay, so there is that boogeyman which doesn't exist, but there is a reason why you're saying don't go out, because yes, there can be many dangers out there at night. That is a fact still, right? The second best are misunderstood, which is metaphor, because those are the thoughts that are supposed to refer to that which cannot be thought about. Okay, so analogies are there, nimittas are there, okay, are there for a reason. Metaphors are there to tell you something, and we are going to look at it. But if you just think metaphor itself is the truth, then you are doomed. Period. Okay. And the one we get stuck in, so that we get stuck in thought. The third best is Aditya, you and me do every week. The third best are what we talk about. The first ones cannot be told, so there cannot be a discussion per se. Either you understand it or you're not through your dhyana, dharana, samadhi. The second one is metaphor, which is a very wonderful way to understand. But if you misunderstand it, then you are doomed. Okay, people do misunderstand that. That is what is told. The third best is what we are doing, you and me, a conversation. And through conversation, we are doing our best to understand these things for ourselves, but also to share whatever limited knowledge we have with others. It's for others to decide with their intellect to what extent they want to take it, what extent they want to do tapasya, okay, and what extent they want to make their lives better and participate into this Indic Renaissance Yajna. Okay, a long time ago. That's how the story begins, right? I'm saying at least 28,000 BC, so at least 30,000 years ago. Okay, we can start telling this story as a metaphor or whatever you want to say. That's when the Kartikeya was born. Okay, now people will immediately, Aditya, ask, oh, so are you just saying it's a metaphor and literally there was no Kartikeya? No, I am not going to get into that argument. I am saying that you can, yesterday, Ashwini, myself and my wife, we went to the mandir here because it was a holiday, 24th. So beautiful. Within the temple, Tirupati temple, we have a Kartikeya mandir, Devasena and Valli on both sides. We took darshan, had one of the best darshan, not many people, there were people. So to me, he's real there. Okay, there when I'm standing in front of Kartikeya, I immediately not always thinking like it's the axis of the earth, this axis of the earth. No, it is a deity to me and I can relate to it very well. I can do the dhyana there. Okay, just like with the Ganesha, my Ishtadevata, Saraswati, my Ishtadevata. Okay. Shiva Mandir, there is a Tirupati Mandir, Shiva Mandir. So we did that. But it's also when I'm talking of, it's not me talking again, it's the Vyasadeva in Mahabharata. When Vyasadeva is referring to this story, the katha that I'm telling you of Agni, Skanda, Indra, Brahma, Vyasadeva is using them as a metaphor. So don't argue with me. I mean, if you have any argument, if not you, Aditya, they have to take it to Mahabharata, which means they have to start studying. So just 6 heads of Skanda, that is what you can see, the the axis that you see, the perpendicular ecliptic axis, but also the celestial axis, the celestial poles against that, and of course the 6 directions. Do notice the ecliptic, the horizontal, but Earth is tilted, right? But there is if you take the Earth's equator, Vishuvrutta, right? That one goes through Singapore and Brazil and Congo, right? And along that line, you expand it, imaginary line against the sky, then that is a celestial equator. And where do the celestial equator and ecliptic come together? They come together at the point of equinox, the spring equinox and fall equinox. My point is, Vyasadeva has taken a very complex phenomenon. It's some time-stamped event of 17,000 years ago and has told us in a very simple language. But I'm saying so everyone can enjoy the story, and a curious one, intelligent person, intelligent individual, someone who understands astronomy, someone who understands other things, someone who is in tune with the thoughts of Vyasa will able to decipher the secrets. We need some multiple layers of passcodes. Okay, so let's go with this. So this is a Skanda. Skanda was born. I'm not going to go through that story. What is interesting is that this particular statement, and Rupa Bhattiji comes on your show also, Aditya ji, so you know that from Taittiriya Brahmana, how Western Indologists and their lackeys in India destroyed this verse like you won't believe, beyond recognition. And again, the unfortunate thing is those many pro-Indic sounding researchers, and they're not even researchers, they pretend to be researchers, and you can see them on Twitter and some forums and all that. They will take something like this, will not understand a word of it, will just copycat some Western Indologist or some of their lackeys in India, will talk some blabbering, utter nonsense and try to make sense of it. This verse, if you understand astronomy, if you understand the India's nakshatra system, and if you understand the cardinal points, this verse immediately takes you to 28,000 BC. Kruttika Prathamam, Vishakhe Uttamam, Tani Deva Nakshatrani. Deva Nakshatra is what? The northern hemisphere part. But where does the northern hemisphere part begins? Equinox to equinox, right? Because on the day of equinox, it is right at the equator, and then now it comes into the northern part for approximately 6 months, and then another equinox, it goes into the southern part. What I'm showing you here, Kruttika Prathamam, Taittiriya Brahmana, if you want to understand, Vishakhe Uttamam Tani Deva Nakshatrani, Anuradha Prathamam, Apa Bharuni Uttamam Tani Yama Nakshatrani. If you have to understand, you have to go at least 28,000 BC, 30,000 years ago. But that's not our today's story. Just I want you to make few points. So here, Kruttika Prathamam, okay, this is the spring equinox, okay, so that is the day sun is on the equator and now it is going into the northern hemisphere, the Deva Nakshatrani area versus the Yama Nakshatrani or Danava Nakshatrani. You'll see many other words used for that, okay, or Asura, Sura and Asura. So Deva Nakshatrani is beginning with that Kruttika when it's at spring equinox. Now that's going back 28,000 BC. Now people will say Kruttika was also at a spring equinox in 2500 BC. Guess what? If you use this, none of this will start making sense to you, especially the things that came after Taittiriya Brahmana, after Yajurveda, the Mahabharata. None of this will make sense. Therefore, I said you have to go at least 28,000 BC. Now, what something interesting happens? See, it starts at a Kruttika and it ends, that Deva Nakshatrani area is ending at Vishakha here. After Vishakha, you have the fall equinox, and now the sun is going into the area of a Yama, the southern region. Okay, just Let's look at that. So this Kritika's existence in the nakshatra system is at least 30,000 years ago. This is not something I have to plead to someone to understand. Okay, this comprehension of it shows whether the person has any knowledge of astronomy or not. If the person is intelligent enough to think logically, think scientifically, this is a test of their qualification. I don't have to plead. Nobody has to plead. Vyasa doesn't have to plead. Any Indian astronomers don't have to plead for this. Lokmanya Tilak, he has referred to this 125 years ago. Many people don't even read. And if they read, they don't understand and they go on a tangent, right? So that's that. Now, what is beautiful is that memory is preserved even in Mahabharata, which is only 7,500 years ago. The birth of Vishaka. Now, why is it preserved? Aditya, this is your expertise, by the way. This discussion is coming in the Vana Parva, where Markandeya Rishi, who has seen supposedly many yugas, many kalpas, okay, he is explaining this to Pandavas. So here we have the birth of a Vishaka. And you know what the birth of Vishaka is saying? So Skanda is a Kartikeya. Okay, so the Kritika Nakshatra is very much connected with the Skanda. Actually, the Kritikas are what? There are 6 Kritikas, 6 mothers of a Skanda. This is all metaphor, guys. Okay, so the 6 mothers, 6 wives of 6 of the 7 Saptarshis, they nursed this young baby Kritika when it was born. Again, it's a metaphor. That's why he has 6 mouths. It's imagined. That's one way to simply explain to ordinary people. But it is referring to the 6-pronged axis, of the earth, 4 directions and up and down. Now, what it says is Kartikeya, which is Skanda, at some point created his own replica. Again, this is a metaphor. So if you're saying this, Skanda se Rakshanam, Vivedacha Maharaja, Parshvatasya Mahatmana, and then it's saying, Yad Vajra Vishana Jato Vishakhas Tena Sobhavat. And there was a creation, Nirman, of a Vishaka, where exactly opposite. And the description says the Vishaka was like Kartikeya. In what way? They both are equinox points. And when did this discussion is happening? Because at one point, Kritika was at the spring equinox, like we're talking 28,000 years ago. But because of the precession of the Earth's axis, as the time goes by, the Vishaka will also be at some point at the spring equinox, and the situation is exactly reversed. And therefore, that is what it is saying. So at Kartikeya, at some point, created its replica, looks exactly like Kartikeya, but in the opposite direction. That is that Vishaka and Kritika are practically in the opposite direction in the sky. That is a birth of Vishaka, again, a metaphor. So what happens from that time, either 28,000 or before or afterwards, the Vishaka and Kritika also, by the way, although their position changed because of precession, many times they are identified with the point of equinox. So Mahabharata at one point, when it is trying to describe the position of the moon with respect to Nakshatra Ardra, but it says that moon was near Vishaka. And many of the superficial researchers of Mahabharata have made a royal mess out of it. Why Vishaka? Vishaka, Vishesha Shaka. What is that Shaka? You can see the Shaka here. It is an old memory from 28,000 BC, 30,000 plus year old memory of the origin, the creation possibly of the modern day nakshatra system. The Siddhanta nakshatra system of 27, 28 nakshatra was possibly formulated in 30,000 years ago. See, there is this ecliptic, and ecliptic is bifurcating with the celestial equator. Remember the 2 lines I showed. That is that bifurcation. Now, let me tell you quickly the meaning of this. That meaning is there in Mahabharata. I would encourage everyone to read the Vana Parva. But Kritika, and a wonderful retired IPS officer and a good student of Indian narratives, Arun Upadhyayji from Bhubaneswar, he has described it very well. In fact, because of him, I understood this. The Kritika, like Kartari, or Marathi in Katri, or scissors, kaichi, whatever the different words people use in India. It's like this. So just imagine that Kritika's position. Okay. It's like this. They are bifurcating. Same thing for Vishaka. In that sense, they are identical, but also the word Vishaka. And the definition of it is given because it's branched out, it forked. Therefore, how beautiful. So these are the astronomy, celestial equal to terrestrial, to understand the world around us. That is what the whole business is. Business of a Ityasa, business of a Rigveda, but also the business of Puranas. A Purana by definition must have cosmology in it. Okay, same thing. Ityasa also, you see it, and Rigveda also. If you go to Mandala 164, you see that. So that's a very nice connection between Kritika and Vishaka as opposite of each other, but also their connection with equinoxes, also their connection as the intersection of celestial equator and ecliptic. And so even when they moved, they were still understood to be as if like that old memories. I mean, look at our times. We have moved away from the calendar that we use by about 2000 years. Ashwini as a first nakshatra we use. Ashwini is no longer a first nakshatra. If you go move from away from Ashwini, Revati is not a first nakshatra. Purva Bhadrapada is not a first nakshatra. Now we are close to Uttara Bhadrapada, but we are still saying Ashwini. It is that old memory that at some point was established. Same thing we use with Vishaka, same thing we use with Kritika. And that's why many times you see Kritika as a Prathamam, even afterwards people saying this. Or Vishaka as referring to the point of equinox. That is why Vyasadeva uses, this is the password coding, okay, 3 levels of coding. Vyasadeva is using full moon's position near Vishaka. It says near Vishaka on the 16th day of the war. But it is near Ardra. Well, why Ardra is called Vishaka? Because the point of equinox, the spring equinox, was at Ardra at the time of Mahabharat war. That's why it is called Vishaka. Okay, but let's fast forward. Let's get to some easier, lighter stuff. I don't want people to think, oh my God, this astronomy is just too hard. Well, it is hard. Let's not fool around. Astronomy is very fascinating. It's highly rewarding, but it is not for the people of low intellect. Okay, let's fast forward by 13,000 years. That's why Vyasadeva, in his ultimate mercy, is giving it to us as a simple story. You can enjoy it at that level, but when the time permits, and if you get deeply interested in it, you can come back and understand with its true meaning behind. Okay, so fast forward by 13,000 years through the half the cycle of precession. Now we come to, I'll tell you the timing, you can see it, about 15,000 BC or 17,000 years ago. And just a beautiful story in 4 verses. Abhijit spardamana tu rohinya kanyasi swasa icchanti jeshtatam devi tapastaptum vanam gata tatra bhudosmi bhadram tatra mudosmi, forgive me, tatra mudosmi bhadram te nakshatram gaganachutam kalam tvimam param skanda brahmana sahachintaya dhanishtadi stada kalo brahmana parinirmitah रोहिण्याद्यो भवत् पूर्वम एवं संख्या समाभवत् एव मुक्ते तु शक्रेण त्रिदिवम कृत्तिकागतः नक्षत्रम शकटाकारम भाति तद वनि दैवतम. Now, those people who understand Sanskrit, a very, very beautiful narration. We will quickly take that story in a simple way. Long, long time ago, 2 sisters. Okay, I mean, all nakshatras are sisters of each other. That is another metaphorical story with a Daksha and the 27 daughters of his marrying to the moon. That's another metaphor to make us understand a celestial equal to terrestrial. So celestial is explained through the terrestrial language that we understand, Adityaji. So here, that first verse now, Abhijit spardamana tu rohinya kanyasi swasa icchanti jeshtata devi tapas taptum vanam gata. What is the storytelling? Abhijit started competing with the younger sister of Rohini. Now, who is the younger sister of Rohini is not explicitly stated here. That's why I'm saying that's when you need to understand astronomy, but you also need the passcodes of different levels. Okay, that's when you need dhyana, dharana, samadhi, sanyam. You need udasinata. What is udasinata? Udasinata means you are not affected in your analysis by raga, dvesha, moha. by attachment to something, by hate for something, and by lack of intellect. If you can overcome this, then you become udas, you become neutral, you become samyak, you become sanyami. Okay, dhyana, dharana, samadhi together, truly to understand the truth. Then you understand that what is referred to here as the younger sister of Rohini is actually Dhanishta. Okay, so Abhijit started competing with the younger sister of Rohini. Actually, they are all sisters in some fashion, right? If according to another metaphorical story, they started competing, but competing for what? Ichanti Jeshtata Devi tapastaptum vanam gata. They wanted to attain seniority, okay, importance. Bhai, main aapse bada hu. I'm bigger than you, kind of thing. Okay, the what you call sibling rivalry, you can say. Ichanti Jeshtata Devi tapastaptum vanam gata. And they both started running to attain seniority, to win the race. Towards what? Vanam gata. Tapastaptum, towards heat, hot, but also vanam. Now, vana has many meaning. Vana means what? Forest, generally we see, but it also means water, by the way. Okay, and to heat the waters. Now, you know what the heat the water means? Another way, it is the beginning of a monsoon. Like, the summertime is when the water is heated and now the wind start blowing in different direction and now we have rain. So as if they are going towards the forest in a simple, see how you can see multiple layers of meanings. Vanam, but it also means water. And then heating water, it also means to the point of summer solstice. And in the Indian context, this is an Indian story. In the Indian context, the monsoon rain begins at the time of summer solstice. So they are going, these are nakshatras. They are going towards the point of summer solstice. In reality, what you will say, depending on how you look at it, relative motions, all motions are relative. You can say either the nakshatras are running towards the point of summer solstice, or you can say the summer solstice is coming towards them. It's the same thing, right? Einstein's relativity, guys. Either the train is coming towards the station or station is going towards the train. Okay, the relativity language, that is what is used here. Abhijit Spardamanatu Rohinya Kanyashiswasa Ichanti Jeshtata Devi Tapastaptum Vanam Gata. They both, to attain seniority, okay, started competing with each other. Okay, who? Dhanishta and Abhijit, and started going towards the forest, going towards the water, going towards the rain, going towards the point of summer solstice. That's the first verse. Immediately, sort of the outcome became obvious. But remember, until the race is over, we don't know exactly who won. So don't be ever premature in judging who is going to win, right? But if you look at the data, this is astronomy data, by the way, it has become very obvious. If you look at the speed of Abhijit and if you look at the speed of Dhanishta, you could see right from the beginning, Dhanishta's speed. Now remember, we are talking celestial equal to terrestrial, but when we go from terrestrial to celestial, we have to change the language. Similarly, when coming from celestial to terrestrial, we have to understand the transformation of a language. Here, we are talking the distance in a space-time. We are talking of a distance in time. How's that? Right? So the x-axis is actually years, 22,000 BC, 20,000 BC, 18,000 BC, 16,000 BC, and the race was over by 15,000 BC. Okay, that's where it kind of ends there. 14,500, something like this. Right from the beginning, in this language of the celestial speed, arc seconds per year, Dhanishta was fast right from the beginning. That, what color is that? Yellow, orange, like color. Right from the beginning, it was fast. And guess what? With time, it just got faster and faster and faster. So it's like very obvious, you can say, as long as they keep everything as fine, Dhanishta is going to win. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. But I'm running ahead of myself. So yes, Dhanishta right from the beginning picked speed and just got better and better, faster and faster, reaching towards the destination of summer solstice. It appeared like Abhijit is also doing the same thing, but then something happened. As if something happened. Because remember, this is a metaphorical story. Tatra modosmi bhadram te nakshatram gaganachyutam kalam tvimam param skanda brahmana sa chintaya. And now this is Indra telling to Skanda, by the way, right? These all four verses. Okay, that's why I showed you those Indra, Skanda, Agni, and Brahma. Indra, Kartikeya is born from Agni and Swaha. That is the story. And Agni is also, remember, it's also the fire, but it's also the sun. Indra is also sun. Brahma is the creative principle, the calendar maker, and Skanda is the earth's axis, and referring to the different motions of the earth. Like earth has 6 different motions. In a metaphorical sense, you can take Skanda as a representative of those 6 motions, just like 6 directions, right? Up, down, east, west, north, south. Indra is telling Skanda, oh my God, now there is a crisis here. Tatra Mudosmi Bhadramte Nakshatram Gaganachutam Kalam Tvimam Param Skanda Brahmana Sachintaya. He says, I am puzzled. I am startled now. Indra is telling Skanda. He says, but they both are running, Abhijit and Dhanishta are running, competing against each other to attain seniority, to attain some samman, okay, to win the award, win the race, running towards water, running towards forest, running towards heated water, that is running towards the point of summer solstice. But suddenly one nakshatra has fallen from the sky. The nakshatras are in the sky, right? Along the belt of the ecliptic, along the sun's path, and they are used as a reference markers, how the travel of a sun happens, moon happens, other planets, and so on. But I'm puzzled now because one of them, Tatra, it doesn't tell you here explicitly which nakshatra. Tatra Mudosmi Bhadramte Nakshatram Gaganachutam. It doesn't tell exactly. Do you know why? Because the person who is not interested in truly knowing the truth won't understand anyways, or will make some foolish mess. But if you want to understand, you will understand. I mean, it's very easy then. Okay, you need some knowledge. You need to do some tapasya, dhyana, dharana, samadhi on astronomy. Okay, Indian Siddhanta literature, Rigveda, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Parashar Tantra, Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya, and then this is a piece of cake. It's so beautiful. It's like watching a very good, high quality, exciting Hollywood movie, action movie. Tatra Mudosmi Bhadramte Nakshatram Gaganachutam. One of them has fallen. What has happened? Actually, as if like they appears, if you look at this, they going away from their main lane. If you want to consider, they on the track they have to run within their lane. If they miss the lane, they are disqualified, right? As if they both of them lost their lanes. So one, Abhijit, has almost like fallen. Tatra Mudosmi Bhadramte Nakshatram Gaganachutam, almost like fallen totally. Okay. Dhanishta also got affected. The Dhanishta one is that orange one. Okay. So it also drifted, but notice Dhanishta recovered. Okay. Again, I'm talking metaphorical language of the declinations and right ascensions and longitudes and latitudes. Okay. And the movement along the cardinal points. Dhanishta recovered, but Abhijit never recovered. As if never recovered, it just continued to drift away, and fell from the sky. What happened? Fell from the sky, which is something that's like above your head, which right now at night also you can still see that Abhijit, which is a Vega, which is a Brahma Rashi, this summer triangle. Now summer is gone, but at late night, maybe just at the sunset, just after sunset, you may be able to see on the western horizon right now. Okay, so that is gone there, right? So that time, this is 15,000 BC, the Abhijit has moved so much away, or rather it has gotten so much closer to the celestial North Pole, that it was always staying in the sky, always staying on the northern horizon and not even setting. So something that does not set is not useful as a nakshatra, as not part of the 27 nakshatra, because you want that nakshatra to set and to rise. If it doesn't serve as a nakshatra. It will serve as a pole star. It will serve as some other reference point like Saptarshi, but not as a nakshatra system. That has happened. That's why Indra is puzzled. And Indra is telling Skanda to go contact Brahma. In the corporate world, we say, go and talk to this guy at supply chain, right? He's saying, go talk to Brahma and figure this out. Kalam Timam Param Skanda Brahmana Chintaya. Along with Brahma, think about the solution for this problem of a time. Why problem of a time? Because one of the nakshatra, the Abhijit, is no longer serving as a nakshatra. It's not capable of doing its job. right? We have a HR problem here. We need to get somebody else. We need to rearrange our organization, rearrange our organization so that it is effective. That's what it's saying in the time. And then the next verse, Dhanishtadis tada kalo brahmana parinirmita rohinadyo bhavat purvam evam sankhya samabhavat. That time, Brahma and Skanda came together at the suggestion of Indra. They reorganized things. Brahma did something here. He says, Dhanishtadis tada kalo brahmana parinirmita. Brahma reconstructed, parinirmita, okay, reconstructed, recalibrated, started a new calendar with Dhanishta as the first nakshatra. And then it says as a reference, once upon a time, we say, this guy is a new CEO today. Mr. XYZ, so and so, used to be a CEO. So in that language, the second line says, Rohinadyo bhavat purvam evam sankhya samabhavat. A while ago, a long time ago, Rohini used to be in first place. Now it is Dhanishta. And remember where Dhanishta and Abhijit were running. What was their destination? Summer solstice. Vanamgata. Okay. Tapastaptam vanamgata, to heat the waters, okay, to the forest, to the water, to the rain point, to the point of summer solstice. So now at that point, what has happened? These 3 verses, and I'm going to give you one more. All these 4 verses you can only explain for one particular time frame, that is 15,000 BC. That is, we can call 15th millennium, 16th millennium, something like this, between 14,000 and 15,000 BC, that time period. What happened there? Again, look at this time, 14,700 BC. Okay. So summer solstice is now aligning with Dhanishta. Okay. Dhanishta won the race. And what happened to Abhijit? Well, remember, it drifted and never recovered. It became the North Pole Star. That became the North Pole Star of the Ramayana times. Now look at this. This is 14,700 BC. This is about, say, 3,000 years before Ramayana. But by this time itself, the Abhijit has drifted far enough along the closer to the celestial pole. I'm going to show you the picture. I think I may have it right here. Okay. So this is Abhijit or Brahma Rashi or Vega. And this is the north celestial pole. Now, this point will keep on moving. In fact, right now, which is to say in our times, 21st century, this point, north celestial pole that you see here, is right here at Polaris. Okay. And if we go back in time, it has gone like this. Okay. About 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago, it was at Tuban, which is noted down in our Indian literature. And then around the 5561 BC, the time of Mahabharata, the north celestial pole point was here. Okay, this is the time of Mahabharata. Therefore, entire Mahabharata, there is no description of the Mahabharata times of the North Pole Star because there was no prominent North Pole Star. How beautiful. And then you go back further. You come here, this is now, right now we are talking, this is the time we are talking is the 14,000. But if you continue in the time, and this not by the time of this Ramayana here, the 12,000 BC, this north celestial point will come close here next to Abhijit. And Abhijit would act as a North Pole Star. And guess what? That is given in the Ramayana. Brahmarashir Vishuddhasya Shuddhasya Paramarshya Archishmantah Prakashante Dhruvam Sarve Pradakshinam. Okay. So in fact, that time, what is happening? The north celestial point would be here on this circle. Abhijit is here. So Abhijit is not exactly at the pole point, but it's going to act like a pole point, and actually it will make a circle around that north celestial point, but very small circle. Okay, the 2-3 degree kind of a radius or something you'll say, and make a circle. So Abhijit was thrown out of the nakshatra race. Abhijit became the North Pole Star. But something else happened, and that is also captured. How beautiful. Kritikas, they started rising exactly in the east direction. And east direction, remember, is the direction of Indra. Evam uktetu shakrena. Just after this, Shakra said this, then what happened? Tridivam Kritikagata. Kritikas went to Tridivam. I will not go into a long discussion. Tridivam is, think of the eastern point, the equinox point, because you are there think of like standing at the top of a pyramid. Like from that point, you can see in all directions, east, west, north, south, even the all southeast, Agneya, Nairutya, Vayavya, Ishanya, and top. You may not be able to say exactly bottom if you're a pyramid. The point is the Tridivam, like an exact east direction, like think of an equator. From equator, you see east, but you also can see north, and you can also see the south, like a three direction. That is that Tridivam, okay, and the three direction. That is the east direction. That is also referring to Indra, Shakra, east direction, so many things. Eva Muktetu Shakrena Tridivam Krutika Agata. Where did Krutika go? Krutika went exact east. Therefore, now Aditya, this is how people have to be very careful. Otherwise, so many tangents go, but those are all beautiful and intelligent tangents. For example, Kritika's rising due east. Okay. Kritika do not deviate from the east direction. A statement comes in Shatapad Brahman. Now, that Shatapad Brahman, now remember, Shatapad Brahman is what? Is of the Krishna Yajurveda. Krishna Yajurveda is a very, very old text. So, that statement of Shatapad Brahman, that Prachodisha na chavanti, the Kritikas do not deviate from the sharp east, can be a statement of 3000 BC. Now, Western Indologists and their lackeys don't even understand that. I mean, they create a royal mess, royal stupidity by saying it's like 1000 BC, 2000 BC, 1000 AD, any kind of nonsense. But the latest limit cannot be anytime after 3000 BC, because in 3000 BC also, Kritikas were rising due east. But the point I want to make it is the Kritikas were rising exactly due east, even in the 15,000 BC. And 15,000 BC, that time also the Yajurveda is existing, Shukla Yajurveda is existing. So the statement in Shatapad Brahman that Prachodisha na chavanti can also refer to 15,000 or even earlier. We don't know that. The latest one is a 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. But it can be from 17,000 years ago, like what I'm showing you. And there's a reference to it here in Mahabharata. Eva mukte tu shakrena tridivam kritika agata nakshatram shakatakaram bhati tad vanidaivatam. And it was beautifully shining in that tridiva, eastern direction, kritika agata. That's where they went. Okay. I'll just stop with another quote. We started with Galileo today. Celestial is equal to terrestrial. This realization is there in Rigveda, this realization is there in Ramayana, Mahabharata, is there in the Upanishad, is there in the Puranas. Fortunately, we can say, maybe not everything, but that realization through Jesuits who took Indian mathematics, Indian astronomy to Europe, it did reach Europe 500 plus years ago. Finally, maybe not always accurately and precisely, but the likes of Copernicus, Tycho Brahe, Kepler, Newton, Einstein eventually, they did finally get it. And many of them do owe their debt to Indian civilization. Let's end with the Isaac Newton statement, very similar to what Galileo has said. He says, "'Tis true without lying." It's like, this is true without lying, certain and most true. That which is below, which is terrestrial, is like that which is above. And that which is above is like that which is below. Celestial is equal to terrestrial. We use the celestial information to explain something that happens on the terrestrial, on the earth. We use something that exists on the terrestrial, like rivalry between siblings, to explain something that is happening in the celestial. Today, we looked at something that was happening in the celestial, but explaining in the language of the terrestrial sibling rivalry. Maybe next time we will take something that is happening in the terrestrial and see how that was explained using the language of the celestial mechanism. So with that, Aditya, I will stop and you can tell me how much I bored the audience and how much they were excited.
Very excited. Nilesh, this is what people love about you, that you back up what you say. And like I was reading one of the comments, that these are not just articulations. The articulation is a charisma factor. No, sorry, Mike. So articulation is a charisma factor. Like, for example, the entire Western mythology, now we can safely call it mythology, is based on charisma. Like you need a charismatic leader to drive. Sanatan Dharma or the Vedic Shastra are based on tathya, facts. So, like it is our misunderstanding that sometimes we may not understand things, and therefore the Shastra talks about triangulation. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, triangulation.
Yes.
And if Sadhu is wrong, if Guru can also be. See, Guru. The purpose of Guru is to show direction.
Correct.
And for that direction, he is respected all his life.
Correct.
The Guru, the role of Sadhu is to keep, like the very good story of Shatapatha Brahmana. In that the Yajnavalkya, he opposed Vaishampayan, and therefore he worshipped Suryadev, and Suryadev came in the form of a horse to instruct him on the expanded Yajurveda.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is the Yajnavalkya was a disciple of Vaishampayan.
Yes.
But he worked for Rigveda, Paila Rishi.
Correct.
The very amazing thing, like the cross-pollination all the time. So all the four disciples, main Sumantu, Jaimini, Paila, and Vaishampayan, disciples of Vyasdev, they were all mixed up. They knew all the Veda properly, but they focused on their subject matter.
Yes.
They knew all the conclusions, all the Veda. And most of the people who say Bhagavad Puran is a mythology, which is Arya Samaj says mythology. Well, I have to question them that are they playing on the Western hands or they're actually reading? Because Purana only give references to Veda. They do not say they are the Veda.
Correct.
Most of the conversations they say refer to Rig Veda has mentioned this mentioned this mentioned this. Anyway, but the Tathya part, which is again Tathya, Satta, all related to each other.
Yeah.
Which is therefore the Vedic Shastra is not a charismatic Shastra, like which is you don't need articulations. You need to just speak the truth. Or one very famous guru said, just read and repeat with analyzing your brain. You don't repeat unless you understand it.
Correct. Yeah. And so just quick comment, the point that you mentioned where Yajnavalkya is working with, we said Paila Rishi also here.
Yeah, so the Paila Rishi is the disciple of Vyasa. So he's a disciple of Vaishampayan who is responsible for Yajurveda.
Correct.
And Mahabharata also he speaks.
Right.
But he is working for Paila Rishi.
Right. So I mean, see, one conference, I mean, you can see that with the mechanics also, car mechanic needs to know everything, right? He may focus. He says, my expertise is here, right? I was talking to my other friend. He says, I'm Oracle expert, and within Oracle, my expertise is in this, and this.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say he doesn't understand others, but he focuses on something. Focuses on something. And so one example I'll give you, something beautiful, just a short one. I was in one conference, and the conference was boring for its own reasons. But this one gentleman, he was a professor. This was a Vedanta conference. And he initially talked about Vedanta. Well, it's a Vedanta conference, right? So he's talking but Vedanta in the sense of the Shad Darshanas, the Vedanta, like Uttara Mimamsa. And interestingly, again, not surprisingly though, that his expertise is in Nyaya. So after he gave his speech, like someone from the audience, and I did not know that he was a Nyaya expert. Like Nyaya is something I enjoy more. I know everything. I mean, I know very little of everything, but my enjoyment or my bias is towards Nyaya. I love that. It's like you like Basundi or you like Rabdi kind of thing. But someone in the audience told him, because that person knew that he's a Nyayayika, he says, now you defended Vedanta, defended in the sense like told the whole stuff beautifully from Vedanta point of view. Now, can you do it from a Nyaya point of view? Meaning to say now Nyaya has to explain even his own position, like we talked about monotheism, pantheism kind of thing. And I am telling you, that was the peak of my conference. I mean, the best point of my conference. This individual, I forgot his name. He was from Bengal. That much I remember. Like the name was Bengali, He explained or defended or critiqued, you can say, what he has given a lecture, the whole Vedanta. Now he critiqued that or he assimilated, brought it together, the triangulation or biangulation here, from the point of view of a Nyaya darshan. And it was so beautiful. So if you would have listened to him, you meaning anyone, would not see that there is a conflict between Vedanta and a Nyaya,
Exactly.
right? They are complementary to each other. Yeah, back to you. Sorry.
No, a very good point you said, because the Nyaya actually helps us to understand Ved better, and also remove the inconsistencies, because they are all in the mind. Atmate
Yes.
manate jagat.
Yes.
And whenever we try to prove someone wrong, it is important that we first analyze what are we proving wrong. Are we proving Vyasdev wrong? Are we proving Valmiki wrong? Because you and I are just repeaters. We are
Correct.
picking up a shloka of some written by somebody else and trying to understand. So if they say this shloka is wrong or the interpretation is wrong, interpretations can always be wrong. So when you say that
Yes.
this is wrong, then present an alternative view. Period.
Correct. Correct.
Present alternative view.
Yes. Even the Aditya ji, the story that I told today of envious sisters and the interpretation. I mean, what I told you today can be seen as my interpretation. My interpretation today. Okay, that was not my interpretation 11 years ago, which is what is in my book. When did the Mahabharata war happen? Everyone should pick that book and read that book. The fifth chapter, I think, fourth or fifth chapter, Fall of Abhijit. That is that Tatra Mudosmi Bhadram Te Nakshatram Gaganachyutam, right? That was that time I did not understand Dhanishta as the younger sister of Rohini. I had put somebody else. My point is, I am willing to say that I was wrong. And now today, what I'm saying is my better explanation. I think this is the best. Okay. But I am open to the possibility that somebody tomorrow may come and says, Nilesh, did you miss this point? Actually, instead of this, if you understand this, it explains these A4 verses better.
Correct.
I'm ready for that, right? Vade vade jayate tattva bodho. Satya comes to us in iterative fashion, in drips, right? Satyamsha. And to that extent, we clarify ourselves, clean, and go towards the truth.
And I heard one comment that we always talk about supremacy of Sanatan Dharma and talk about supremacy of the Hindu culture. I would like to answer you directly. I'll say, yes, it is superior, and you have to accept it, because I'm not saying on the basis of my analysis, but you look at the results it has produced. So many scientists, Sushrut Samhita, numbers, like look at the outcome. And therefore it is superior. It is not dogmatic, and you cannot listen this kind of conversation in a church or a mosque or anywhere else, because it's not dogma. We are willing to accept faults in our understanding. They are not, and that's why we are not supremacists in a way. Okay, we are willing to, for you to, I want you to learn as well. I want you to read Mahabharata. I want you to read Ramayana. It doesn't matter whether you are Hindu or not. It doesn't matter to me. But you need to read with an open mind. And then you also have to reject what you had old. Because if you do not reject what you have old, see, it's like if you want to eat a pastry and you have a pizza in your hand, you have to put down pizza, then eat pastry. If you can't have pastry and pizza together, it's going to create rasabhas.
Yes.
It's a confusion. Rasabhas means a confusion. Two tastes.
You have to clean your palate before you taste something else, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So to clean your palate. So when you come to Mahabharata, clean your palate. Like I would say that blank your mind, build an open mind, and go for a vacation before you start reading Mahabharata, Ramayana, and believe that everything else you have been read was wrong. And then you start with an open mind, and then you start analyzing. So drishti is not through eyes, because we think through our mind and we interpret through our eyes.
Yes.
Drishti comes here in the intelligence. So build a Shastra Drishti. Like easiest book to start reading is Bhagavad Gita. The easiest book, because it clarifies who is Asura, who is Sura, what are the good qualities, what are the bad qualities, what is Nyaya, whether you are a Buddhi, Man, or a Sharir. So all these basic cleans have to, the slate has to be clean before you go for the postgraduate degree. Okay. So thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much, Nilesh ji, as usual. One of the fantastic presentations, as usual. And Kritika will discuss more on that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Kandamatar Bhagavati Durge Kantarvasini.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
namaste and thank you.